afternoon, everyone. This is Falguni, and you're watching Candidate Cicerone Live. We are at the 47th episode of this journey, which we started a year ago. Before the time, IG Live and FB Live were like too promising. The idea was to bring cerebral and meaningful conversations to your daily life by having conversations with people from different backgrounds, yet connecting with fashion and lifestyle. With the barrage of so many live chats happening every day, it's hard to figure out which chat to kind of listen to. Yet we suggest wait up. Listen to this talk show because we will be telling you how to take that one tiny little small step towards mindful consumption and a conscious life right here and right now. We have with us Devyani Kapoor, founder and curator Shuffling Suitcases with us today. Welcome, Devyani, to the show.
Thank you so much.
So, Devyani has been an ex-journalist and a blogger. She's walked the path of consumerism just like all of us. But what she did differently was probably ask a lot of questions. And these questions kind of made her start India's first 360-degree sustainable fashion platform called Shuffling Suitcases about 3 years ago. And during this journey, she has worked with 350 plus homegrown labels, sustainable labels, and taken them to domestic and international, both the markets. Also, what she has done during this pandemic is commendable. From being an offline exhibit model, she has taken the entire platform as a single woman army online. And her journey is super exciting. So we begin with the very, very primary question, Devyani. From being a journalist to heading India's first sustainable platform, how has this journey and the shift been for you?
It's been a roller coaster ride, and if I say anything else, I think I would be lying about it. It's not been a cakewalk at all. It's been a very different and a very difficult journey, and I will not sort of mull my words and make it look very flowery, because it hasn't been very flowery for me. Coming from a journalism background, an English honors student who went on to do her journalism and became a journalist. I did work with a lot of live wires. I did work with UNICEF. I worked with IANS and things like those. And then completely shifting to something that I had not even studied about was a very difficult decision for me. But at the same time, I think it was an overnight decision that sort of changed, my life completely. So it's been a nice journey. It's been a journey full of experiences, a lot of learnings, a lot of good, bad experiences. But as a whole, if I have to say how this whole thing has been for me, I think it's been a roller coaster ride for me.
A roller coaster ride. So tell me, how did that shift happen? What prompted you to shift from writing about different feature stories or whatever communications you were into to being a blogger through Breviloquent?
Yeah.
And then kind of shifting to Shuffling Suitcase. Please take us through your journey.
So I think, Falguni, I owe it all to my blog today, and that is the reason that Breviloquent will always be the parent company, like how we were also speaking. It's always going to be the parent company, and then of course there are other branches that are sort of coming out of it. So I started up as a blogger, which was back in 2014, when I quit my very well-settled job, a very well-paying job. And overnight, I made a decision of starting something of my own, because I think that understanding of not being able to work under somebody and not wanting to work under somebody, and those strict deadlines. Well, that does not say that I don't have strict deadlines of my own. I do. I am a workaholic. I don't take breaks at all. But when I do, I take my own time. But when I started, I think blogging was an extension of being a journalist. It was my own first-hand experience that I wanted to talk about. And that's what Breviloquent sort of started to become for me as a platform. I did write about brands. I did write about a lot of fast fashion brands, and I would not lie about that, because that was the bread and butter for me back in the days. But that led on to one question being unanswered every single time I would work with a big name of the industry.
Hmm.
Their PRs, their marketing heads would not tell you the entire story.
Hmm.
They would tell you a half-baked story that the brand wanted them to tell you.
Hmm.
And that sort of played with my head and the journalistic background that I had of, asking and being curious. I always wanted to know more about the people behind the brand rather than that one designer who was the front head of the brand. But that was not happening. So over the years, I did work with a lot of big names, and 3 years later of being a full-time blogger, I quit. I completely quit working with fast fashion brands because I did not resonate with their ethics at all. It did not fall in. It did not fall in. I mean, it was not something that I could resonate with anymore. Of course, the 3 years was so good. It was paying me so well. It lifted a middle class, girl from that. So, I mean, of course, I was living a great life that my parents had given me, but this was a whole new world for me, and it opened up for me, and it was all flowery and rosy. So to say no to that, to those checks coming in was very difficult, but I did have to take a call because somebody had to stand up, and I
Right.
felt I could be that somebody, and that's what gave birth to Shuffling Suitcases, which came on to become India's first 360 platform, where we would inform you, educate you, and then sell you rather than going the other way around.
Right, right. Which is a very interesting concept, I feel, because most of the people are out there to sell. That's the narrative, right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
kind of shifting that narrative of even informing people, which I personally find very interesting.
Thank you.
So tell me, while you're also heading Shuffling Suitcases, I'm sure the shift would have happened at personal level first, right?
True,
Um,
of course. Like you say that every author's first book is their own life story. So again, this was also my own life story that sort of gave birth to Shuffling Suitcases. When I quit working with these bigger brands, I had to be that one example, bleeding a lot of other examples for people. So I started saying no to fast fashion. I started saying no to all of those bigger experiences that were coming my way, and I started to live a life where I wanted to be connected to the person who was actually making my garment or making my shoes or making my accessories. When that started happening, I got to know this was called slow fashion. This was called sustainability, which was not an in thing back in the day. Now of course it's become a hyped out word, and it's sort of a bandwagon that everybody wants to get onto. But back then, I think this understanding of differentiation between fast fashion and slow fashion led me to start this platform. And it started with my own personal life where I said no to fast fashion. I quit shopping from malls. I quit shopping from these, big brands. And I came to these smaller ones. I started finding these smaller ones and knowing their stories and, spending my hard-earned money onto those people. So of course, it started from my own personal life, from of course fashion, which was the biggest player in my life. That's what sort of brought me where I am. To then, of course, little changes in your kitchen, in your bathroom, in your home as a whole. Now we don't consume so much plastic. Of course, we still do because living in India, you don't have a lot of options, but plastic consumption has become very, very, very less. A lot of sustainable options and alternatives have taken, shape. So these were the changes that I started bringing in my life, which of course led to Shuffling Suitcases happening.
right. So we all know, Devyani, that most of the middle class families think about our moms, think about our grandmoms. They always followed a sustainable lifestyle.
True.
India was always sustainable. And yet, however, the current sustainable lifestyle, which is being marketed,
Yeah.
looks more like a luxury segment sustainability,
True. True. True.
what is that one issue we are addressing? Do you see some deep rooted issue that somebody is addressing, the marketing people are addressing here?
There's a lot of gray area at the moment, Falcony. A lot of gray area because when I started, like I said, sustainability was not the in thing.
Right.
It was still, and I'm talking about the millennials. Of course, our
Yeah.
grandparents, our parents have been living such a sustainable life. But
Yeah.
for us millennials, I think it came across as a very new thing, as a very new concept. It came across as something that had to change your complete lifestyle. You needed to have a lot of money to be able to adapt to this lifestyle. But well, no, I don't agree to that. And like I said, there's a lot of gray area because people are not understanding what sustainability is. What they're sticking on to is the fashion aspect of sustainability. But that is not all. Sustainability is not only restricted to fashion. It's it's a way of life. You have to change the way you've been living. You have to start thinking of if you really want it or do you need it. And that difference could be anywhere from home to fashion to anywhere of any decision that you're making in your life. Even let's say buying like these cushions, you have to think, do you really want them or do you need them? So that has to be that one concept which sort of embraces your entire lifestyle, not just fashion as a part. And you're right, of course, now the way it's been introduced to us, it looks like a very luxurious concept. It looks like one of those faffs that you need to have a lot of money and you have to be loaded to be able to buy sustainable fashion. But that's not true. There are such beautiful brands, and you will find them on the website also, who start from 1,000 rupees. So it is a mindset, I feel. You need to change that mindset. And when you actually do that, you will start finding more options and alternatives for yourself.
Do you think clothing was always an indicator of wealth? I mean, that's
Correct.
how clothing forms a part of your identity. And so, probably, was it that the wealthy were opting for more products, more garments, and to dissuade them, the luxury segment of sustainability is doing rounds? Do you think there could be
I
some?
don't think so. No, I don't think so. I feel the culprit here is the whole trend word.
Right.
What is trending? People want to be in trend. They want to wear what, let's say, the Bollywood people are wearing. That is what they look up to. But you have to actually stop looking up to those people because you're not them. You're yourself. You have to suit your own body type. I cannot today dress up like Deepika Padukone and expect to exactly look like her when I wear those garments. No, that's not possible. So I don't think the culprit here is luxury segment as a whole, but I think it's the trend. And trend with anything. Of course, the richer will become richer and the poorer will become poorer. Like how it's been. But in fact, there are also a lot of brands who were fast fashion brands were now shifting to being luxury sustainable, right? So again, it's a trend. They're taking you towards a certain trend which you need to say no to. Sustainability is not a trend. It's here to stay. It's not something which is here today and goes off tomorrow. It's a way of life. So I don't think you need to have a lot of money or look up to the luxury market to be able to say, okay, now I'm sustainable. So you have to curb your own wants and needs to be able to be sustainable.
Sure, sure. So there are a lot of for all marketers, for all clothing or lifestyle brands, young urban aspirational crowd is the main audience. But this is the audience which gets excited about H&Ms and Zara's, where on discount you get products at 500 rupees.
Right.
This is a sustainable clothing brand which products typically a top is around 2,500 to 3,000. So
Yeah.
you're talking about a 6-time increase in the price of one particular
Yeah.
product.
Yeah.
How should one lure this entire generation into being more mindful? What's your thought?
And this is something that I really address because I get a lot of these kids who used to come to the offline pop-ups, and this is one question that they would always ask me. They would say that, hey, I can go to Zara or maybe Mango or maybe Forever 21 5 times and buy 5 different things, but here I can only maybe take two, in that amount. So I think my take on that is, if you actually stop thinking about right now and you think of a year as a whole, for example, annually, how much did you spend on buying Zara and how many times did you actually wear it? Did you just wear it twice and because now it's off trend, you've stopped wearing it? You do not take it out of your closet, it's just lying there. Versus if you buy something from a sustainable brand, that mindfulness and that satisfaction of knowing that your money has gone to somebody because there's a human being actually behind that garment that you've bought. You wouldn't know who's made that Zara dress for you. You will not know that, and you will always go and pay whatever the tag says. But when it comes to a sustainable brand, you'll try and haggle and you'll try and bargain, right? So I feel the mindfulness is knowing that there's a person behind what you're wearing. Once you start thinking like that, you will first think of that person before thinking of if you actually need that Zara dress. So I think you need to start asking the right questions, and that is what I tell the millennials. That you have the internet, right? You have the information, like it's overflowing. So start asking the right questions and be a little more mindful and have that humanity towards other people also, because these are not machines working on your garments. These are real people, and their lives matter.
Right, right. So you kind of traveled the country with shuffling suitcases, and I'm sure the audience responses would have been very very different across the places. What a Delhi or a Chandigarh would give
Yeah.
would be very different from what a Mumbai or a Kolkata or a Bangalore or probably even Ahmedabad would be.
Yeah.
You know. So,
Yeah.
what's your insight on the consumer behavior? Where did you find that people were most adaptive?
Right. uh, it is changing. From the first edit to the 20th, I've seen the graph only going up.
Mhm.
uh, People are becoming more conscious. They are starting to ask a lot of questions. They are starting to spend a lot more time. And that has been very visible from the first Calcutta edit to the fifth Calcutta edit, where people, just came to buy and move out the first time because it was a new concept, something new happening in their city, versus the fifth time where they knew shuffling suitcases and they knew that, okay, they're here only once a year. So we have to go and, hoard up on our sustainable clothing. So they would come and they would spend a lot of time. And I've made a lot of friends on this journey who now have become, if not 100%, they've at least reached that 80% mark of being sustainable. So of course the graph is going up, but I feel that places like Delhi and Bombay are still, I think, a little ahead, I would say, in comparison to other places like Ahmedabad, and even Calcutta for that matter. Calcutta does shop a lot when it comes to sustainability because of their love for the craft and the love for the art. So I think that is also what mixes up with the whole concept of sustainability. But Bombay has really responded well, and I feel that also comes with the kind of people who live in the city, So Bombay has been damn good. Delhi is always very welcoming. Calcutta is, of course, topping the chart as of date. Even on the website now, I think 45% is, people coming from Calcutta.
Wow.
So Ahmedabad have only been once, so I will not really know a lot about it. But places like Goa, which is like a melting pot of all these different cultures and cities, and so that again is a place where people really understand and they started to adapt to sustainability now.
Sure, sure. How do you make daily practices or daily changes in your overall lifestyle, not just clothing? Let's leave aside clothing because that's what we generally talk about in fashion. And as you rightly said at the starting, it's not just about clothing. So, what are these other changes that you've made in your life?
So I started to recognize the places in my own house that sort of were more were the most non-sustainable places. For example, your bathroom and your kitchen have the most amount of single-use plastic.
Hmm.
If you actually think from the day you started using a toothbrush, or let's say a toothpaste, you will not have a count of how many you've used and thrown. So I started to recognize places like these in my own house, and I started to look for more sustainable alternatives for these. So, for example, from using a Pepsodent or a Colgate, which comes in a plastic packaging, and you use it, let's say, over a month or two, and you throw it off. So I started to convert into somebody who was using these little tablets. So that's a new invention. It's a new innovation. Basically, it hasn't really been. It's not from India. It's from Germany. That's where they started innovating this. So what they've done is there are these little bites. So you just chew on them and you brush. That's it. So it works exactly like your toothpaste, but you don't have a plastic covering. And even that comes in a biodegradable pack, or even you can reuse into a glass jar. So things like those. Then coming to the kitchen, I completely eliminated the use of foil or a cling wrap. I switched to a beeswax wrap, to cover my utensils after I've cooked something and I have something left. So these little changes, I think, and even what you see behind me, these cushions, they've all come from directly from the artisans. So now when I buy something, I try and see where it is from. I try and see who's benefiting out of me spending my money, on that certain product. So I think now if you enter my house, and in fact, yesterday I had friends over who said, your house looks like an Airbnb now. It has all these art pieces and all of these things that you collect from different places. So I think that's a very big compliment if people who have nothing to do with sustainability are now understanding that there is something different about my house. Then of course I think it's a very big compliment. They're understanding it's not the usual home. And even when you go to my bathroom, you will not find plastic at all. You'll see all these different exciting alternatives to different things that we use. I don't use tissue paper in my bathroom. I only use the cloth towels. Like, how our mothers used to use. So that's what I do. And these are the little changes that I started bringing in my own lifestyle. And that's where I am today.
Nice, nice. Also, I think the most important aspect that I noticed about your lifestyle was your eco-friendly wedding. I think that kind of completely changed the way grand Indian weddings are like really perceived. It's once in a lifetime event, and
Yeah.
people spend a lot of money into all the decoration and jazz. So tell
Yeah.
me all about your eco-friendly wedding. What was different, and how did you make it happen?
So it's been 6 months now, and I think it still remains to be that one beautiful memory, because post that I was in quarantine. I've been just in this house. Well, when I was getting married, we were very clear that it had to be a sustainable wedding. Both me and my partner, because he's seen me do what I do, and of course my family has seen me do what I do. So they knew, and they had initially, I mean, from day zero, agreed that this is how it's going to be. Coming from a Kapoor Punjabi family where weddings are supposed to be grand and luxurious, and you're supposed to spend all that you have on them, I said no to it. And so I took a stand basically. That is where it started from. And uh, so from day zero, we started thinking of, not letting our parents spend anything because of the fact that they've done whatever they have till date, right? So we didn't want our parents to spend anything. So we invested our own savings into the whole wedding. And then we started making a plan. So the wedding was 1.5 days, as opposed to those week-long functions that you usually have. 1.5 tightly packed day, and that's it. You go back with memories, and you go back with something that blew your mind because you've never seen something like this before.
Yeah.
And of course, mostly for the older relatives, because this is so new to them, right?
Flipping over.
They did because I think they were expecting to get those typical cards and mithai ka dabba, as an invitation, which never happened. So I've been very fortunate to have a set of parents who really stand with me and stand by my decisions. So my parents called them up and said, she's getting married, and they were like, okay, great. So when do we expect the invite? They said, okay, no invite, this is my invite to you. So we're going to be sending you a WhatsApp message. It'll have everything. We'll send you an e-card on your email, and that's it. So I think my relatives started to flip, and they thought that maybe they don't want to spend money, and that's why they're doing this. But I think now my family's seen me doing what I'm doing, so they were also okay about it. Once we told them the reason behind doing this,
Yeah.
they were fine. They were fine with it. So no cards whatsoever, no paper whatsoever, no plastic whatsoever at the venue. I was very, very clear. We did a destination wedding because I didn't want a lot of people to come. And that was the reason that we went a little far away to do it. 120 people from both the sides, and that's it. And this was more of a friend circle rather than a relatives, because we were very clear who we wanted to spend, the big day of our life with. So no extended family, only very, very close people who were genuinely happy in our happiness. So 1.5 days of everything packed together. This was in Jaipur 6 months ago. And in fact, the venue searching is also a very big hassle, because a lot of these places will not agree to how you want to do things. They're so in place with the aise hi hota hai, So when I told them that I don't want your plastic ka glass, I don't want your kaanch ka glass, because you'll be wasting so much water again washing them. I want a cooler. So that was these were little things. So this was one place where they made us sit and they said, we want to know, why do you want to do this, why so many changes? So I sat him down and I said, this is what I do, this is my lifestyle, and I want people to take this back. They agreed, and that's when we said, okay, this is it, let's do it here. And this was 100-year-old royal palace. So that's where we tied the knot. And so Kulad is something that we brought in. We told people to take it back to their rooms and keep reusing until whatever time they can, and then maybe take the fresh one. So that was one thing. Our decor was completely zero plastic. We reused the decor again and again rather than bringing those fancy flowers. We stick to our roses and our gendas and all of those things, and we kept moving. So I planned the wedding and the decor in a way that I could move things around. I could move, one panel to the other, and that's it. You have like a new background. So that is how it happened. And I had my Pinterest boards ready, and that's what I was showing to all these vendors. They found it really exciting and stupid at times because they said, "Shadi hai, aap phool nahi lagayenge bade bade." I said, "No, I don't want it. I'm happy with this." Uh, from my trousseau also, everything came from the artisans. To what I wore came from Bangladesh, from an artisan who did my Dhakai Jamdani sari. To even finding local tailors, and giving money to them rather than the Sabyasachis of the world. So I got my entire wedding outfit, everything under 35,000.
Wow.
So everything was under that. And I reused a lot of things. I did not buy a lot of shoes. I had a lot of shoes lying in my house. So I didn't buy heels. My mehendi outfit, I knew was, then you're not supposed to wear it basically. I don't know how it happens in different cultures. But with us, once the haldi is done, you're not supposed to re-wear that outfit. So I said, okay, it's going to go waste. So why should I buy a new thing? I'm going to wear an old outfit and, let that be. So these were the little changes that we brought. And even for the favors that we gave to all the bridesmaid and people were tulsi seeds. And, we wanted them to take it back, plant it, and remember our wedding when they see that little plant growing. So these were little things that we did. We created a lot of decor out of the katran, basically, from my designers that I work with. So we recreated things and we made those nice bracelets and stuff like that for these girls. So everything was repurposed, reused, recycled, to whatever extent that we could do it, to be able to sort of have that 1.5 day of fun. So that's how we did the whole thing. And I think people were more than being shocked, I think they were too excited. They were waiting for, okay, what next? What do you have in line next? So that was exciting. Most of my wedding functions were the daytime functions. I didn't do evening because, again, you need generators and stuff like that. So a lot of electricity, a lot of light. We did a lot of these daytime functions, and 1.5 day, and people were gone. They were back to their homes. So that was exciting. Yes, I think I if given a chance, I would like to get married to the same person again and do the whole thing once again, because it was new, it was exciting. And when we put it out on the internet, a lot of young generation, a lot of their mothers wrote to me saying that this is how I want to, marry my kid. So that for me, for the next 20 days after being married, was so exciting. That aunties were writing to me saying, "Beta, you opened eyes, And now I don't think we will spend so much on the wedding. We don't need to spend so much on the wedding." So this was a budget wedding, and I think it became the talk of the town back 6 months ago.
Fantastic. I remember my colleague writing a story on this.
Yes.
Wedding and getting in touch with you. I was seeing all of your wedding stories and I told her, you get in touch with her and get all the details and we have to write about this, But that was a fantastic thing, and I wish more and more people kind of look at the reusability part of it rather than just the grandness part of wedding, Because that's one of the industries which is thriving in India, and it is like a booming industry, and it's not going to get slow. And if there's a change there, then I think we can bring about a huge change in the industry.
Absolutely. In fact, the highlight was a month later. I think the Brides magazine was doing, the Harper's magazine was doing this whole article on sustainable wedding. And the editor got in touch with me and, she said, "I've seen your wedding, I've seen your pictures. But the idea is that we've already completed the story. We don't have a bride. We don't have a real life bride who could talk about it. So they scrapped the entire story when they heard the entire wedding and, the little elements, and they put the story out there. So I think that for me was very exciting to see that these bigger weddings that happen, these posh weddings, there was also a little tiny story where these people related to this small wedding, which at the same time was as exciting, but did not spend all the money that they had.
I understand what you're saying. Wow. All right, so I think we're already towards the end of our talk, but this one last question that I want to ask you is, and since you've been talking about slow fashion,
Yeah.
on Revolucant, and shuffling suitcases, have you also noticed that there is a lot of greenwashing happening currently, and a lot of brands getting the tag of sustainable fashion, though they may not really understand what sustainability is?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, it's become the hype word. Everybody wants to get onto the bandwagon and fool the customer by saying they're sustainable, but they're actually not. In fact, a lot of brands come to us to sort of onboard them on the website or even offline platforms. And when you start asking them, the tough questions, they fizzle out. So, yes, absolutely, there are a lot of people who, in the name of sustainability, are trying to sell you something which is not sustainable. So it all sort of stems from you being curious, going back to the same thing. You need to start asking the right questions. You need to start using your power of asking the questions. So if you start doing that, I don't think brands can make a fool out of customers. Customers will always be the king, and they will know what and how to buy. But you need to also start asking questions. Don't just go and spend your money on something without even knowing where it's coming from.
So tell me, what are these questions that people should keep in mind? What should a consumer think before buying?
The first question would be, who made my clothes? As simple as that. Can you ask the brand more about the people behind that garment that you're buying? Let's say, for example, today you want to go and buy a sari from a brand who says, this is a sustainable sari. Great, it's sustainable, but can you tell me how is it sustainable? If they tell you, okay, this is handloom, hand woven, all of that. Okay, great. Can you tell me who are these people behind making my sari? Can I know more about them? What clusters do you work with? I think one question leads to the other, but if the first one only is unanswered, that's your answer. So all these bigger brands, I've questioned a lot of them also, like how Fashion Revolution says, keep asking, keep asking, keep asking till you get your answers. And if you don't, then well, that's your answer, that they're not sustainable. So I think you need to use your right of asking the right questions from these people and make them answer. I mean, a customer has all of that right to, ask before you're buying, because you're spending your money. So ask and get your answers. If you do not get your answers, it's not sustainable.
I agree. I agree completely. So it has been such a pleasure speaking to you, Devyani.
And thank you. Same here.
I'm sure the viewers would have found quite many interesting pointers, especially from your eco-conscious wedding and how to kind of identify a sustainable brand, to why being mindful is extremely essential in today's time and age.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was so nice. And I hope that through this, people understand what is right and what is not, and they start asking the right questions.
We hope for that too. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the viewers, we will be back again next week. We are having a very interesting speaker lined up for the next week. We will be announcing her name soon. So keep checking the updates and see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.